So we were discussing this reading by Himanshu, Inequality in India, and we have talked about the monetary inequality. Now let's talk about the non-monetary inequality. So first of all, we'll talk about how the inequality is emerging across the different social groups, SC, STs, OBCs, even among religious groups, Muslims, Christians, Hindus, like that. So how inequality is emerging among them. Well, if you want to, what he starts by saying is that so you have the share of a population group in consumption, right? Upon the share of population group in total population, right? So whether I write consumption or I write income, whichever inequality you want to look at. So if the share of the, let's say, share of SCs in the total consumption is equal to the share of their population in the total population, then there is no inequality. That is equality, right? So if it is greater than 1, this means an advantaged position. If this relationship, then the social group is advantaged position. If this is less than 1, then the social group is at disadvantaged position. If this is equal to 1, then there is equality. Then there is equality. Right. Now, there are different groups which we are looking at. SCs, STs, OBCs. SCs, STs, and OBCs. And we are looking in terms of income and consumption. We are looking at in terms of income and consumption. So as far as share of SCs in income upon share of their population group in total population is concerned, as far as SCs is concerned, so that share is falling. So share of SCs in the total consumption upon the share of their population group in the total population, that is falling, right? So it is less than, it is less, this is less. So what I'm trying to say is that for SCs and STs, this numerator is less than denominator. OBC's group have relatively higher. Relatively higher shares of consumption and income, right? Now, but still less than the population share. Means compared to SCs and STs, this share is higher, but still less than the population share. So you want to say, let's say OBCs are, let's say 15% of the total population. And if they do not have even 15% of the total income, then it means that they are at the disadvantaged position. So compared to SC, STs, they are relatively better, but it is still lesser than their population share. One. Forward castes, they have the higher share. I mean, there's what to write in that. They have the higher shares of income and consumption relative to the population share. Since he has written it, so let me just write this also. For forward castes, So they have higher share. I think you should rather write it here, relatively higher compared to. This is what I understand from the reading, compared to SCs and STs. That is rather better way of writing this out. Okay, that is one thing. So you are looking at the inequality from income and consumption side. The another way is that you can look at inequality from the asset ownership side. From how much of assets they are owning, these different groups. Asset inequality. Asset inequality. Right. So again, you have SCs, you have STs. So they have the high level of asset inequality. So their share of the uh, share of SCs in the total assets, right, upon share of their population in the total population, that is less than 1. So that share is less than 1. So that is making the asset inequality higher. So yahan pe when I have written lesser, it means that share of SCs in income and consumption upon share of population is less. I mean, that is there. But here when I'm writing high, I'm writing high asset inequality. So be very clear on that. They also have high asset inequality. Well, you can also write this thing here. This is having high income inequality. High income inequality. You can write it like that as well. Like that. One thing. And in rural areas, the position of the SCs and STs as far as asset ownership is concerned, that is more or less same. But in urban areas, STs, they are far better than SCs. This is what he's trying to say. So we will write this. Rural asset inequality. Urban asset inequality. Right? So in rural areas, SCs and STs wealth position is somewhat similar. So you can see the table which he has shown, where he has shown the relative shares of the assets by the social group. And you find this, that the asset share upon population share for SCs is 0.49 in 2002. It was 0.54 in 2002 in 2002. Then in 2012, it was 0.5 for both of them in rural areas. But in urban areas, you look at this, SCs have the asset share upon population, SCs have 0.42, while STs have 0.6 in 2002, while in 2012, it was 0.35 for SC and it was 0.54 for STs. So STs are a little better in urban areas, right? So, but very different from the wealth position. Different wealth position for SCs and STs, right? For SCs and ST. And he also write one line. He says this that for ST category, it was strong enough to indicate the emergence of the creamy layer in within this group, right? That is there. Okay, then differences according to the religious group. So analysis as per religion. Analysis as per religion. Hmm. So we are more interested in minorities, right? So, for example, Christians, um, Muslims, etc. Uh, so we'll talk about Christians, and we'll talk about Muslims. Hmm. As far as Christians are concerned, Himanshu says that they have the larger share of consumption as per their population share, their own population share. So it means that they are having an advantaged position, right? So larger share, largest share of consumption and income than the population share. For Muslims, they have the lesser share. So they are in the disadvantaged position. They are in a disadvantaged position. Then he also says this that if you look at the division as per rural and urban areas, this, I mean, in rural areas, their situation is little better, but they're still worse off than SCs and STs. This is what they are saying. Uh, SCs and ST households in urban areas, right? So the situation can't actually write urban here. So this is about Muslims only. So, but they have a this is a different point I want to make. Right. And this is an important line which you should write in your answer. The situation of Muslims is relatively better in rural areas, but they are far worse in SC and ST households in urban areas. So it was not the comparison for rural urban, but there is one more line which he has written. You can write that. So they're saying that in rural areas, the situation is better, right, as compared to what they have in the urban areas. But if you compare the situation, even in the relatively better position in rural areas, you'll find this that they are far worse off than SC and ST households in the urban areas. One thing, right? Muslims have also seen their share of national income relative to the population share decline in both rural and urban areas. That is also the point which you should write. Hmm. Hmm. Muslims have also seen their share of national income relative to the population share decline in both rural and urban. Decline in both rural and urban housing, urban areas. So these are the 2 points which you can write, 2 or 3 points. So they are trying to tell you that Muslims are in a far disadvantaged position as compared to the other religious group, right? And this is not only, of course, this is in terms of consumption and income. But if you look at the asset share to population ratio also, right? So this again is there. So asset inequality also. I salute you that you guys can remember this much in the paper. But you have to, you don't have a choice. But if you pick it up one day before the exam, you know the result. Huh? I do not have to remind you that thing again and again. So better is that you make the notes early and you start uh, you start writing about them, right? So asset inequality. There are Christians, Sikhs and Jains on the one hand, and there are Muslims and Buddhists. On the other. So they say that if you look at Christians, Sikhs, and Jains, they say that if you look at Christians, Sikhs, and Jains, then they have the higher asset ratios in proportion to their population share, right? So higher asset ratio or higher asset share compared with the population share. For Muslims and Buddhists, they have lower asset to population share ratios. So if they have lower asset to population share ratios, this shows that they are at the disadvantaged position. For Buddhists, he makes a very good point for Buddhists particularly, that why do we find for Buddhists the asset to population share ratio lesser? Because large number of SCs and STs, they could large percentage of SCs have converted towards Buddhism. That also could be the reason. So you can write the complete line. I'm just writing the main thing. It is a reflection of large percentage of SCs who have converted Buddhism. Who have converted to Buddhism. One thing. Hmm. And then he says this, that of course you are comparing this across the groups, right? So you've seen it across the social groups, you've seen it across the religious groups. Now let us also look at across for gender, right? So gender inequality, gender based inequality. Gender based inequality. So few things about gender based inequality. One, there is the disadvantaged position of women, particularly in the labor markets, right? So one, on the positive side, he says this, that one thing which is happening is that the gender gaps, the gender inequality which could have been there in education and nutrition, those are reducing over time. So that's a good thing. He's right. On a positive side, on a positive side, gender gap between gender gap in education and nutrition outcomes are decreasing. Second, right? So the disadvantaged position of women is there because there is a low workforce participation of women, right? Low workforce participation of women, right? And not only that, he says this, that so Chaudhary and Varick is an evidence about this thing. have written a paper in 2014, and they have tried to analyze the declining workforce participation of women in high economic growth period. So I've not written the complete sentence. Please write that yourself. That they have tried to analyze that why workforce participation of women was reducing, and that too in the high economic growth period. So particularly for the years 2004-5, 2011-12, right? You look at GDP, it grew by 8% per annum. But you look at female workforce participation rates. Uh, They decline from already low 35% to 25%. And they say this, that few things um, uh, could explain this. One, they were of the view that um, increasing female education cannot actually explain all this very clearly. So increasing female participation of women in education and economics, right? That yes, of course, women are getting more and more educated, but because of that, there is such a huge fall in female participation in workforce. That also can't be explained, right? The another reason is that because of the mechanization in agriculture, now you don't need those many people in agriculture. So people might have said, okay, fine, we don't need it is women labor in agriculture. So that also could explain the displacement of women from agricultural activities due to mechanization and explain this. Right. So this is there. I mean, this is what they're trying to say. Okay, fine. This could happen because of this. And they're also saying that gender gaps are there and they also manifest in the wage gaps. Female workforce, they tend to get for the same job lesser wages as compared to their male counterparts, right? And female wages are less than two-thirds of the male wages in rural areas, and they have not caught up over time. That is, so again, this also could be an evidence. You can just write that. So gender gaps also manifest in gender wage gap, right? So female wages are less than 2/3 of male wages in rural areas. You can see such a gap. And in urban areas, at least for the regular salaried workers, I mean, you don't find any, you don't find much difference. So, and also, and have not caught up over time means and have not reduced over time. One thing. Gender wage gaps are lower among regular salaried workers in urban areas. Amita, right? And women wages, they have not caught up with the men wages since 90s. That's what they are saying. So this is about the inequality as per social groups, right? So next time we'll do the differences, inequality as per occupation and factor ownership, and we'll conclude this reading, right? Chali. Thank you, beta.